Okay, so good morning everyone. It's December the 2nd and it's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner at Douglas Jackson. As many of you know, we are executive search consultants and recruitment consultants across the customer-led industry. This is a series of webinars that we've been running, which we like to bring content and information and education to our audience, which might be of interest to you. I'm delighted to have Elke join us today. As many of you probably already know, Elke is the founder of IvyHouse, a pioneering leadership development company. But Elke spent 20 years running one of the leading executive development businesses in Europe, and she's delivered programs for over 40% of the FTSE 100. Elke and a team have collected multiple awards for their work in leadership and performance change, and I'm delighted to have Elke with us today to talk about extraordinary leadership and turning the talent of today into tomorrow's leaders. So I'll hand you over to Elke and we'll crack on. Any questions that you might have for Elke, just pop them in the chat box, or any problems, pop them in there and we'll get to you later. So let's enjoy the session. Thanks. Over to you, Elke.
Thank you very much, and good morning everybody. I am just going to share my screen so that we can get started. It's really lovely to be here, and I'm really mindful of how much pressure we're all under right now. It's about to be Christmas and we're all rushing to the end of this most incredible year, and we're trying to get everything done. So giving up your time to take a bit of space, to have a think and have a reflect, I think deserves to be acknowledged. And I've designed the session for you in that way. So what I'm going to be doing throughout the session is asking lots of questions to encourage you to reflect on your own leadership development provision that you have within your business and what you're going to need going forward and how you might get there. So I'm going to grab a paper and pen and just answer the questions for yourself. Some of them are quite deep and quite personal, so you might not want to share them with everybody else. So my first question for this morning then is, how many great leaders do you have in your business? The word I usually use is extraordinary. How many great or extraordinary leaders do you have in your business right now? Just write down a number write down a number on your piece of paper. And now I'm going to ask you a couple of other questions. I want you to ask, when I asked you that question, did you automatically go to senior leaders? Or did you also think about the emerging leaders in your business? Did you think about creative leaders, community leaders, leaders of change, thought leaders? People that are able to think outside of the box and may never lead a group of people. So the reason I'm asking you these questions is to help you figure out how multidimensional your personal view of leadership is and how multidimensional your organization's view of leadership is. And then when you think about these great leaders, no matter whether or not you have a big number or a small number, what's your role been in developing them? Do you buy them in? Or do you develop them within? How highly regarded is your leadership offering in your business? And how seriously is leadership as a skill taken in your business? Now, I want to ask you a final question on this initial bit, which is, if you had an incredibly high number of brilliant leaders in your business, what difference would it make to the culture, to the environment, and the results that your business were getting? So why am I asking these specific questions? Because if we're going to change the state of leadership, not just in our organizations, but in society as a whole, we need to start with a deep understanding of where we are now and what difference it's going to make if we're going to change things. And it is only an if, because what I see in organizations all over the world is actually taking the talent of today and taking them down pretty much the same path as we have that the leaders of today will put down themselves. And if we do the same that we've always done, we're going to get the same as we've always got. So if we want to create change, if we want to create more better leaders, then we're going to need to start to think slightly differently around how we develop them. So here's my second key question for the morning. What's the state of self-leadership like in your organization right now? And before you answer that, it's really easy to answer this question lightly, but I'm going to provide you with a few more reference points. How many leaders do you have within your business that are truly playing to their strengths, that show up every day and are in their element and are doing what they should be doing? How many of your leaders actually know how their mind works, make choices around the thoughts they hang out with? How many of your leaders take 100% ownership for how they behave, or are they still in a place where they're blaming the situation, COVID, lockdown, or others for how they're behaving? Now, all of these questions, I guess, bring us to the ultimate question that we're trying to answer in our session today, and that is, what will great leadership development look like in 2021? And what I mean by that is, is it going to be meaningful for people on a personal and professional basis? Is it actually going to change behavior? Because quite frankly, nothing changes unless behavior changes. Is it going to create incredible learning communities within your business? And is it going to create creative, collaborative, change-ready leaders, the kind of leaders that we all need in our businesses right now? What I'm talking about, I guess, is leadership development that actually works. So my aim today really is to be a catalyst for your thinking. My invitation is to take this time, turn off your notifications, throw your phone over the other side of the room or put it under a pillow, and just take some time to really think about how you can create shifts within your organization. We have a saying at IvyHouse, which is, if we want a better world, then we need better leaders. And if we want better leaders, we need to change how we're developing them. So clearly, this is a massive passion for me, and I could talk about it for probably a week, but I only have about 35 minutes. So what I'm going to do is focus on three key things: ownership and choice, content and process, and coaches and community. And I'm going to take this through the lens of the world that we are all living in, because clearly, as we all know, as we look at our leadership development for next year, we're living and existing in a very different working environment. But before we tackle those three things, I just wanted to sort of touch base on what the skills are that we're really looking to develop. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because so much has been written on this, and I suspect all the people showing up for a talk like this are pretty clear on the skills that we're looking to develop. But let's just reground ourselves, and then we'll look at how we actually develop them. There are many ways to cut through this data. I've chosen for today the Deloitte Millennial Survey, which lists the skills that are most important now and in the near future. And it lists them in order of priority. Now, the reason I say that is it's because it's not until number 14 on this list that we get to any knowledge-based learning. Everything else is what I would call human skills, human development. Now, this is interesting because if you look at where the budget in learning and development goes, it's roughly about 92% goes to technical knowledge, knowledge-based teaching. So what we're saying on the one hand is we need to create leaders that have confidence, motivation, resilience, collaboration, and all of this stuff. And on the other hand, we're putting most of our money somewhere else. And what's also interesting is that the expenditure on these kinds of skills at a senior level, almost on the floor. So at IvyHouse, we have a term for this. We call it human leadership. Human leadership is the practice of leading oneself and others in a way that empowers everyone to reach their full potential, delivering individual, organizational, and societal success. And I want to pick up on one particular phrase in here, which is empowers everyone. There's two parts to this, and they're very important when we think about creating more better leaders. The first is what puts people in their element. And you'll know this for yourself. You'll know that there are certain parts of your job that you just love, the days when you're doing that. You are fully in your element. Doesn't matter how challenging it is. You are wholly there and you are going for it. And then there will be other days when you are totally not in your element. Now, of course, Our job is to enable people to play in their element, to work in their element as much as they possibly can. The other main part of our job then is to give them the skills that enables people to do that and tops them up. You can work in your element, but you still need a whole lot of skills to show up as your best self. So what do I mean by upskilling? And I'm going to give you an example of this because it's really easy to talk about things like collaboration. I mean, that's a big thing that everyone's talking about. We need to collaborate more. But let's look at the skills that will enable people to collaborate more. The first skill is accountability. They need to be able to hold themselves and others to account. They need to be able to communicate. They need to be open to learning. They need to be open to change. They need to be able to give really good briefings. So there's a whole skill set associated with the top line skill of collaboration. Another skill, another thing people are talking about a lot at the moment is what I would call devolved responsibility. So actually making people accountable, self-leaders within their business, which means they need to make decisions, they need to follow guidelines, but they need to build trust, both within their teams and with others. They need to be able to create and sustain robust debate. They need to be okay to fail and learn. They need to be what we might call agile learners. So when we're talking about actually we need devolved responsibility, what we need to do then is put a whole lot of skills in to make that happen. Another one is emotional connection, for example. Talking a lot about emotional connection, emotional intelligence. But underpinning that might be an understanding of grief or how to help people find meaning in their work. So I just wanted to start with establishing in terms of what is it, the skills that we're talking about, because it's really easy to chuck out words like collaboration, like creativity, like thinking outside of the box, but actually giving the people the skill, the competence, the ability to do all of those things is a whole different world. So in our experience, what we found is that there are 7 foundation skills, as we would call them, that underpin exactly this kind of human development, these sort of leadership and life skills that we need to put into our organizations to cope with a very different world. I would argue, having spent my career coaching CEOs across global organizations, is that we've always needed these skills. But the reality is, in the way that the world has changed recently, we're noticing we need them far more. So we need to enable people to operate from a place of core strength. That's about being aligned to our values, aligned to our purpose, playing in our element, understanding what our belief systems are and understanding where they're serving us and where they're not serving us. We need to develop the skill of 100% ownership for my behavior, my impact, the way I think. I just want you to imagine for a moment a world where every leader you worked with actually took 100% ownership for how they showed up to every situation. We need to teach people the skill of conscious mind. What that means is understanding that we live in a thought-created experience and that we have control over where we put our attention in our thinking, and that drives our feeling and our behavior. We need to create a culture of courageous learning and agile learning and being open to change and not being motivated by being right and winning. We need to teach people the skill of creating intentional relationships, understanding how to build trust, how to extend trust, how to rebuild trust if necessary. And then, of course, there's the obvious skill, and the one with a lot of focus on right now is proactive well-being, both mind, body, and soul. And all of this leads to what we believe, or what we call, human leadership, the people that create the kind of environments that we want. So those are the skills that we need. So how are we going to get there? Well, I think one of the most critical factors is what I would call ownership and choice. Having worked in learning and development for a very long time now, it is about 30 years. One of the things I've come to recognize, the team here have come to recognize, is people can't be done to. What we're all trying to create within our organizations is people operating from strength, passionate people, a rampant learning environment. But what we have to remember is that this is discretionary. People choose to show up this way. So before we look at how we create this kind of environment, let's actually look at what we mean by ownership. So in our leadership development, we're trying to create people that have 100% ownership for how they show up. And that means their behavior, their impact, having 100% ownership for their personal growth, their personal brand, how they collaborate, the contribution they make culturally. And it has to get really deep, this ownership. So taking ownership for how they think, how trustworthy they are. I just want you to think for a moment of a leader that you don't rate. Do you trust them? And of course, there are two types of trust. You might trust their character, but not their competence. You might trust their competence, but not their character. So when we talk about ownership, it's these things that we're talking about. And it's this that is what we have to put in at the center of our leadership development. So if that's what we're aiming for, if it's that level of ownership, self-leadership that we're looking to create, how do we create a culture of ownership within your business? How do you do it? Well, this is what I've learned. This is what I've seen in all my clients that really works. The first thing is get rid of all of your sheep dip solutions. You know, having a situation where when you get to a certain level, you get to go on a certain training course. When you get to another level, you get to go on another training course. Actually, that doesn't work. What works is people deciding the career path they want to take, the skills they want to take, taking ownership for their own development, and then creating a learning path for them. And I know that sounds complicated, but if anyone wants to talk to some of our clients that have done that really successfully, really happy to put you in touch with people that have created learning academies. Now, the reason I say get rid of sheep dip learning solutions is because when we have them, it's as if people just think it's their natural right to go on that training program. I believe full-heartedly that everyone should apply for every training program they go on. They need to show that they are committed to the learning, that they're going to show up, that they are going to actually take it seriously. And it has to be a badge of honor to get on that place. We ran an emerging leader program for a client. Well, I think it started about 3 years ago, and they were going to run one a year. And it had, I think, 50 places on it. And they got 720 applications from around the world for that one program. That, of course, led them to laying on a heck of a lot more. They now have a whole culture of learning through the cohorts of people that have gone through those programs. So your job then is to create a program that people are actually vying to get on. And when they get on it, they feel like they've got the badge of honor. But of course, when they get on it, it's your job then to ensure that the content, the experience, the network they create as part of that learning is of value. Because the minute they show up and it's not a value, your learning culture takes a nosedive. And I'm very big into learning contracts, learning commitments, and holding people to account on how they show up to that learning environment. So let's pause for a moment, just ask another question for you to jot down. Is ownership part of your leadership culture? And again, I'm just going to give you some references to check in on this. For example, do people turn up to meetings on time, and are they fully prepared? Do they do the work they've committed to do within the time frame? Or do you have a culture where people are emailing everyone and CCing the world just to cover their backsides? Do they cancel turning up to training to do more important things? Do you have a blame culture? Do you have a nice, loving culture where nobody has the courage to hold anyone else to account? So if ownership is part of your culture, you would see behaviors where people were taking ownership, where they were showing up, where they were delivering to deadlines, or if they couldn't, they were letting everybody know. Also, ownership looks like putting your hands up and going, you know what, I've just been promoted. And whilst I have these skills, I don't have these skills. And what I'd love your support in is how I develop those skills. So of course, this leads me to another question for you guys, which is learning part of your leadership culture? And what I'm talking about here is a genuine learning culture where people openly admit and share their mistakes and help others learn from them, where people review every project and see what's gone well and what hasn't gone so well? Or do you have a culture where we're in such a rush that we just jump onto the next project and probably make some of them the same mistakes as we've made before. Are you brilliant at giving, asking, hearing behavioral feedback? Do you know the difference between having an opinion and giving behavioral feedback? And I'm not talking about anonymous 360. I'm talking person to person. I care about you feedback. Are people so connected to their self-worth that they are able to analyze the work they've produced in a really quite clinical way, because they know that that work that somebody might be critiquing isn't attacking their self-worth? Or do people take that kind of critique in a very personal way? So when we have a genuine learning as part of our leadership culture, these are the sorts of behaviors we see. Do you recruit in your own image? How many BAME senior leaders do you have? What's your culture like with difference? Do you have lots of long-serving members, and then when somebody new comes in, you know, they have to find the way that things are done around here? So that's the first critical building block. If we're going to create leadership development that works, people have to make a decision to enter into it. Then they have to apply and actually show that they're worthy of the investment, and they need to be held to account in terms of how they show up to that learning process. So the second one is content and process. Now, it's really easy to get lost in the complexity of leadership. So just before we started, I Googled leadership and I got just under 3 billion results in 0.7 seconds. At IvyHouse, we think it's quite helpful to look at leadership in terms of the what and the how. And I'm going to explain this because I think this is crucial to understanding how you need to get your leadership development in both of these areas. So the first part of leadership development, first part of leadership is the what. The what is really the job of leadership. And the job of leadership in some bizarre ways is always the same. We always need a vision. It doesn't have to be your vision just because you're the leader, but there has to be a vision that people buy into. One of the things that's been so destabilizing over the last few months is that all of our visions have had to be thrown out of the window, and we have to actually at speed create a vision that is ready for a world that we don't really know how it's working. So we need a vision that people buy into, vision that people understand. Then we need a plan that is going to deliver that vision. And then we need an environment where people are ready and willing and able to deliver the vision and deliver the plan. So doesn't matter if you're running a 3-man painting and decorating business or a global bank, the job of leadership is pretty much always the same. So what makes leadership very different then? Well, it's this. It's the how. It's the who you are and how you show up to leadership. If you take Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, both playing in the same field, but both very different leaders and created very different results because they had different visions, different plans, created different environments. But what was really different was who they were at the center. And whilst you might not recognize yourself, this is actually who you are. You are this person in the middle. This is what we call core strength at IvyHouse. You have your own personal blueprint. You have at your base your driving forces. They're like universal values and they drive you forward. Whatever your priority driving forces will determine how you show up to the world. Then you have your personal values, things that are really important to you. For example, I have a personal value around freedom, and therefore, if I worked in an environment that didn't allow me a certain amount of freedom, creative freedom, then very quickly I would not be working at strength. You will then have your belief systems. Most of us have both limiting and empowering beliefs, but shining a light on those belief systems and realizing actually they're just thinking we've bought into is really helpful when understanding that we are how we become our best kind of leader. And then there's a piece around what it is that puts you in your element. I spoke about this earlier. Have a think for a moment. What is it that puts you in your element. I, for example, am in my element when I'm talking to groups of people about human development. If, however, tomorrow I was asked to talk to a group of people about spreadsheets, I can tell you quite clearly I would not be in my element. Interestingly, I have set up 2 businesses in my career, Blue Sky being the first and IvyHouse being the second, but I have never been the CEOs of those businesses. Why? Because being a CEO is not me in my element. I would be a rubbish CEO, but I'm a great creative director. So what's your element? And then within that, what's your purpose? And what's your vision for not only the kind of leader you can become, but the kind of life you want to create? And this is where every single piece of leadership development should start, because we have no right to lead anyone else unless we can lead ourselves. And interestingly, in the history of leadership development, in the traditional kind of leadership development, they might do the odd psychometric, they might do a bit of coaching, but going really deeply into this, it's quite rare. Wrapped around this are the skills and knowledge we bring to our leadership roles. So I have no skill and knowledge around P&L, but I have a lot of skill and knowledge around creating programs that change behavior. So I need to know what skills and knowledge I have right now, but I also need to know what skills and knowledge I need to develop to do the job expected of me. And then finally, the piece around it is the behavior I choose on a daily basis, how I show up to my role. Do I show up sharing my stress and my overwhelm? Do I allow myself to get stressed and overwhelmed? Do I show up showing care, compassion, accountability? Those behaviors are how people know me as a leader. It's how people know you as a leader. It's really interesting exercise to ask yourself the question, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? And that will be a direct reflection of your behavior. It's an even more interesting exercise if you ask yourself, what are the 3 behaviors people that I live with would say? And what are the 3 behaviors that people I work with would say? What are the most consistent behaviors? And there you have your personal brand. So that's where all of our leadership development needs to start. It needs to start by understanding who I am, developing the skills and knowledge I need to do the role that I am required to do, and taking 100% ownership for the behavior I choose in the moment. So that's the sort of whistle-stop tour of content, but what we then need to do is look at how that content is delivered. And we all know we can have the best content in the world, but if it is not delivered well, then you haven't got a hope in hell of it creating any change. At IvyHouse, we use a mnemonic. Is it a mnemonic? It's probably not, is it? Called D#. D standing for deep. We believe you always start with the personal, getting to understand who people are, what they want, the challenges they have, what they want to create in their life. It's the foundational level. Then we have a belief that it needs to be shocking in some way, because how many times do people show up for leadership development? They're like, oh yeah, seen it all before, heard it all before. But actually, the minute you tell them something that they did not know, or get them to do something they have never done before, all of a sudden they are listening and learning on a very different level. It also needs to be honest. And that's really about bringing your whole self. Having the courage to call people when they are not doing that. It's really interesting on the programs, we often get people saying, putting their hands up and saying, well, I'm one person at work and I'm another person at home. And we're like, well, that's just not true, really, is it? I mean, you are one person, but you're choosing different behaviors. The question is what belief system do you have that makes you think you have to only bring these behaviors to work or only bring these behaviors to home? So we have to deal with people on an honest level. It has to be actionable. It needs to be memorable. And it needs to go deep enough. And it needs to allow people to practice with really radical support and radical challenge so that they are able to go out and put things into practice. It also needs to be robust. What I've seen more than anything else when I go and review programs for organizations is somebody's read a whole load of books and they've brought the best model from here and a great model from here, and they've topped it up with a bit of this and a bit of that. And actually, it doesn't all sit together very well. And that just doesn't work. So the journey of learning that you take people through has to add up to a big picture of understanding who I am, the skills and knowledge I need, how I get those skills and knowledge, and how I show up to my role. And robust also means tried and tested. I mean, tried and tested, it always works, and they can keep using it. It becomes part of how they think and the habits they create. And finally, it needs to be pertinent. And that means it needs to deal with live problems. We have a phrase at IvyHouse is do it, and do it again. And we are constantly asking people to bring live problems, immediate issues that they are facing. Because when we have an immediate need, all of a sudden I'm going to learn. I was saying to Michelle earlier, look, I collapsed in front of the TV last night and watched a MasterChef, and it all glazes over me. I look at the nice food, but nothing really goes in. But if all of a sudden I was told, tomorrow you're going to have to cook this meal for somebody very important, I would be listening and learning in a very, very different way. So what you need are the kind of coaches and facilitators that are able to support people through issues that they are currently facing. So let me ask you another question right now. With the development you have, does your content actually transform behavior? Because that's the aim, right? That's the aim of any kind of development, any kind of investment, which costs a lot of money, takes people out of the business for a certain amount of time, is to create change. And if it creates change, is it short-term change because I'm all excited because I've been on an exciting program? Or is it long-term change because actually something has happened within my neural pathways that I now understand and see things differently? Because that's the kind of thing we're trying to create. So I'm really conscious that I am giving you so much information here, but I am also conscious, I believe, that that Michelle is recording this so that if you need to go back over some of this information, that you can happily do that. So 5 principles of how you do this, how you create a learning environment where people actually want to and can create change as a result of it. Well, the first is what we would call multifaceted learning. One of the things that I think makes us a bit different in our programs is we work one-on-one in small groups and in large groups. So if you join a cohort with one of our programs, there's usually about 50 people on there, and you'll get to work one-on-one with a coach. You will get to work in a small group environment, but the 50 people gives you the opportunity to give people challenges that they would never normally get with a group of 12. So if all of a sudden I say to a leader, right, go and pitch yourself as a leader in front of 50 people in 10 minutes, that kind of challenge, that kind of learning cannot be had in a small group where they get very comfortable with each other and it's all a bit matey. You also need to build an infrastructure. So multifaceted means that there is an infrastructure of learning, be it a book or podcasts or 24/7 available content, videos they can watch. They can access the models that you've taught them. They can go over some of the learning. And in fact, what I would say is one of the brilliant things about going virtual is that you can then record the programs and people have access to that learning whenever they want. You need to enable them to have shadowing opportunities, peer-to-peer shadowing opportunities, and let those be self-managed. So that's multifaceted learning. Psychological safety. This is something that's talked a lot about in training, and in my experience, very rarely achieved. Psychological safety requires permission and protection to deliver potency. So I have to feel I have permission to bring my whole self, whatever challenges, and I am not going to experience judgment. I have to feel protected within that environment, so I know that people's intent is good. And then we enter the place of potency. The way you set it up needs to be truly interactive. Now, of course, this is much easier when you're working in a room with people. And I've got to tell you, so when lockdown happened in March, we were about to launch 3 new programs. We have in-house programs and open programs. And I think there was one launching at the end of March, one launching in April, and one in May. And people come from all over the country, all over the world sometimes to enter these programs. And all of a sudden they couldn't happen. And, you know, we had clients going, yeah, what are we going to do? We can't lose our talent. And this is, And we actually sat down and set ourselves the challenge of putting the programs that we had into a virtual platform. Now, I'll be really 100% honest, we were not technical geniuses at all. If anything, we were the human, the connecty, the huggy, you know, we're with you physically here, people. And our product director, who is an amazing woman, her name's Claire Mitchell, please don't poach her, she is brilliant. And she said to me, Elke, so at the time, our NPS score in face-to-face learning was 95%. And she said, Elke, we're not just going to be good at virtual, we are going to be knock it out the park good. Now, this is a woman that had never run virtual training in her life. And the team went on this incredible journey. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is because what we've discovered through virtual learning is that actually getting the whole group to interact is almost easier in a virtual environment than it is in a face-to-face environment. If you have any questions about that afterwards, just let me know. So the other thing we need to do is we need to build relationships in the room. One of the things we do when we contract with people, when they come on a program, is we talk about their role of providing radical support and radical challenge to their learning community. They are not showing up to be done to. We always talk about the fact that a third of their learning will come from the coaches and the facilitators. A third of their learning will come from the other people on the program. And a third of their learning will come from themselves if they allow themselves to do that kind of learning. And of course, it's easy to put this in, playful and human. But how do you do that when you're in a virtual environment? Well, there are all sorts of ways, you know, games, we have fancy dress situations, we have chair yoga, we still call people up on stage, we get people to volunteer, they get to go in campsites, they have home group activities. So there's a whole way of structuring it so that you can create some incredible relationships, even if you don't meet people face to face. So this brings me then to my final of my 3 critical things if we're going to change leadership development. And that is coaches and community. Now, I'm really conscious I'm giving you a whole lot of lists here, but what do you need to look for in your facilitators and coaches? I believe you need to look for a deep personal belief in the content. This isn't about somebody writing a program and somebody rocking up to deliver it. They have to know your content inside out if they're going to have the capability of taking people as deep as they need to go. You also need coaches and facilitators that recognize that they too are on a learning journey and are prepared to share that learning journey with other people. Some of the most poignant moments I've seen in programs are when coaches get up and say, do you know, I've got to share with you, I got something really wrong last night. And this is what happened. And this is the conversation we had. And then I realized that I had a choice about how I was showing up. So actually coaches that are prepared to be learners in a learning environment. I believe very strongly, I've always believed this, but I believe this more than ever, is you also need coaches and facilitators that bring love, care, and compassion to the situation, that recognize that whatever is going on for people, it's okay, and we are there to support each other. Alongside that, you are looking for exceptional performance coaching and facilitation capability. Performance to engage people as they're standing up while, you know, they're in their living rooms and their dog is coming in and maybe their kids are coming in and their husband, like mine keeps doing, coming in to interrupt me. Also think you're looking for practitioner experience. I am blown away by the amount of companies that employ people who have never led a thing to develop people in leadership development. Actually understanding how it feels to be in a team where 3 people are leaving, or a merger situation, or to be furloughed. Actually understanding what it feels like on the ground is really important. The new skill that people have to develop is technical capability. So we have a production manager on every single one of our programs. It's a whole skill in its own right. And all of the coaches and facilitators have to up their skill of technical capability. And it's something that a lot of people do not want to do. They need to be a member of a team. And when I'm talking team, I'm talking about not just the training team, but your team. Because what you're trying to do is create behavioral change in your business. And what that means is you, your learning and development, your talent team, and your coach and facilitators need to be one and working together. And ultimately, all of that team need to bring a courageous learner mindset. So my final question, I guess, is, do you use genuine experts in your business to create behavioral change? I'm not talking about theoretical, technical knowledge about leadership. I'm talking about, how do we create behavioral change in other individuals? This, of course, and I think is probably one of the most wonderful things I've experienced while doing this work. This is all supported by an amazing learning community. So if you want to create proper leadership development within your business, you need a community of learners with positive intent, that they are proud to be part of that learning, that they have a shared language, that they are able to talk about thought spirals, or they understand what ITAC means, or they understand how to structure a meeting together. And I think one of the most important things about this, I didn't say this at the beginning, I must have forgotten, is that it is a non-hierarchical community. Leadership development should be offered to people throughout your business. They should apply for those positions. And one of the best things I've ever seen, because if you want to create leadership change in your business, you need to find those catalytic people, and they might be at any level in your business, that are open to learning and open to change. We have a client, this was another in-house program actually, but they work in 17 different countries, I think, but they had a future leaders program. And on one program we were running, we had a guy who was a team leader. He was 19, called Mohammed, in a call center, and the deputy general counsel on the same program. And it was quite funny, because on the first evening of the program, they were sat next to each other. And literally the look on both of their faces was like, I'm on the wrong program. Paul Mohammed he literally came up to me and went, I'm on the wrong program. It's a mistake. And the other guy was like, how did this happen? I'm clearly not very valued in this business. But of course, the cross learning, the learning that happens from these different people, and the silos that are broken down because of it, and then the energy you get from the learning, the shared learning and the shared experience and the shared understanding of personal vision, and then the hope that brings to the business, is quite incredible. And then if you as a business continue to invest in ongoing membership of that community, you're going to get ongoing learning. So I lied earlier. I said that was my last question, but this is my last question. Are your people strengthened by their learning community? Do you actually have a learning community within your business? So I'm thinking that's me. What I've covered today is these three things: ownership and choice, content and process, coaches and community. I'm really happy to take any questions. And if anyone wants any more information, more about content, actually, it's worth them looking at the book and the podcast. And this is our website address. So I will shut up and answer any questions that anybody has.
Elke, that's great. Honestly, thank you so much. It's such a subject that I'm so passionate about, and it's intrinsic to everything that you and I do, and everybody that's on this call, and the world around us, isn't it? So thank you so much. We have got some questions coming in. So Caroline has asked. I'm going to try. If you guys are happy to talk, we can open up the mic and you can ask Elke your question directly. So Caroline, if you wanted to sort of unmute yourself, and you can ask Elke yourself.
Yeah, no problem at all. Elke, the content's been brilliant today. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I'm quite interested to know if you've ever worked with an organisation where the board have engaged you to roll out training or to conduct training, but actually it's obvious that they're the ones that need the training more.
Caroline, let me answer that question. Yes. And I get asked it every time I speak. So this is what I think. If your question is, what do we do about that? I think that it depends. Sometimes on the board, you have somebody that gets it and goes, we need to do this too. If that does, I would engage them, as I was just talking about finding your catalysts from around the business. I would pick them up and take them and put them on your program so that they become an advocate. If you don't have one of those, what we do, and it's really interesting, and I can't name any names, we're working with a massive organization where this has just happened recently. And they're like, all our emerging leaders, they all need training, put them on training. We don't need any training. And of course, I've said, well, that's all well and good, but these people are about to learn some stuff that I'm telling you now you don't know. And I can tell you now you don't know it because I spent my 20 years working with CEOs. So we can train your people, we can create incredible change, but you're going to be left behind. They're going to be talking a language you don't know. How about we run what I would call interactive keynotes for the senior leaders so that you can get an overview of the learning? So, and I'll be really honest, the truth is what we're doing is a bit of a Trojan horse here, because we're basically getting the opportunity to get in front of them. And then we ask them question after question to help them reflect on who they are as leaders. And I have never done that when leaders don't come out and go, do you know what? Might be quite nice to have a bit more of that. So the answer is yes, but you have to be clever on how you do it, but never, ever use it as a reason not to change. Because I have another organization with a senior leader, well, I've been doing this for 25 years. There's been countless organizations where senior leaders haven't engaged. But what we always encourage is why this learning community is so important is breakfast with the board, lunch with the board, and all of a sudden they're getting this hit of amazing creative energy and they're seeing the value to their business, and all of a sudden they start to help. And that's where additional things like a book, a podcast, a quick keynote, a learning lunch just helps them to start engaging. But if I go back to the very first thing I said this morning is, you can't do to anyone. They have to show up and make a decision to engage. If they choose not to, work with the people that do choose to engage, and eventually you will light enough fires in your organization. You know what happens when we're on bonfire night and there's a fire over there, we're all attracted to it, aren't we? So that's what you need to do, is you need to get those fires going and people are going, what's going on over there? Does that help?
Does. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Excellent, thank you, Caroline. So Steve, I'll sort of look and open up your mic if you want to ask your question next to Elke.
Thank you. I would just like to ask if there are any good examples of how to put in place that ongoing community, almost like the alumni sort of approach, which would bring people together over the long term. What was it practically that kept people in touch, and hopefully not too much additional expense, but I guess that's resourcing.
So the first thing is if you get your training right, you create an alumni in the room. And it's because, I know this sounds dramatic. I'm probably going to put you all off IvyHouse in saying this, but we once had a program, and in one day, out of 50 people, 17 people had been in tears, but good tears, right? Now, once you've gone through that kind of experience with somebody, you feel connected. I had a guy, in fact, it was from Accenture, and he emailed me literally the other day, and he said, I've just been on a Zoom call with a whole group of the people I was on a cohort with. I know these people better than I've known my best friends that I've known for 20 years. So the first thing is get your training right so you create that kind of connection. And then you have to make it easy for them to reconnect. But, and part of that, getting it right first, is creating buddy relationships. So one of the things we do over the course of a program is we get people to create buddy relationships, at least 3. So you're creating connections within the cohort. And then I think what you need is you probably need what I would call a reboost session twice a year. And it's open to everybody that has ever done that program, and they show up, and it's, crikey, I know right now it's difficult, but in the previous world, it used to be drinks, and we would do a bit of presentation, or the L&D team would do it, and they would get the opportunity to revisit that learning. Now, interestingly, we are doing a number of those virtually for clients now. I don't think that costs any money, especially if it's virtual and there's no alcohol involved. People have to bring their own alcohol, sadly. But it's just giving them what they call is like a hit, a reboost of what they learned, and a reminder. So I think that really, really helps.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, Steve. So Maurizio, you've got a question, if you're happy to ask that.
Yes, hello. First of all, fantastic presentation, very engaging. I can see your passion, and yeah, I thought it was really, really good. In terms of leadership, there's so much written about leadership these days, as you alluded with the Google search. If you could sum up what word really best sums up, if there's one word that really would sum up leadership, what kind of word would that be?
Oh, that is a horrible question.
Sorry.
You can't come again. Right, one word that sums up leadership. Learning.
Learning. Okay, good.
It's in my mind, and I think we see this more than ever before. We have a model. I've said to Michelle, I'll come back and do a content presentation for you guys if you want it. But we have a model which is called being above and below the line. And it's a really complicated model. It's a big white sheet with a black line in the middle of it. And I always say to leaders, where are you? You're above and below the line. They look at me like I'm a bit weird. But interestingly, lots of them give me an answer. And I'm going, what does it even mean? And then I explain. So when we're below the line, we're motivated by winning and being right. When we're above the line, we're motivated by learning. Now, what I have seen in my career, and I know my coaches would say the same, is that you go into SLT meeting after SLT meeting, and almost everybody in the room is motivated in some way by winning and being right, whether or not it's getting the budget they need to do what they want to do, or get the promotion they want, or outsource the function they want to function, whatever it is. And there is so little curiosity, openness, recognition that their opinion is only their opinion, and it's only formed because of the data that they've been subjected to date. And if we actually take a place of genuine, openly, what we call courageous learning, and go, wow, that's amazing. You have a completely different opinion to me. Tell me everything you know. What have I missed? What have I not seen? I think that's where leadership happens, because that allows us all to show up as our best selves. I'll probably change my mind later. If I do, I'll let you know.
Well, thank you for that. Very good.
Great, thank you. And Samuel, if you are happy to ask your question, you can unmute and ask Elke.
Thanks, Michelle. Elke, thanks a lot. That was great content this morning. My question is, what best practices can you recommend for measuring the success of the concepts that you've discussed?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I'm going to put my hands up and say I have a team of people that deal with this, and I generally don't. Okay. So what I'm really happy if you want to email me. My email is elke@ivyhouse.co.uk, and share with you what we encourage our clients to measure. What I do know is that we look very deeply at personal, so my own personal measure. If I've been through the program, how I feel, what I feel it's made difference to me in terms of my internal peace, my confidence, my robustness, my skill level, how I show up. We then talk about team. So has the team actually seen a behavioral difference? You will have noticed I'm all about the behavior. Has the behavior changed? And the other thing that we track is promotability, because of course our work is all around emerging leaders, future leaders, graduates, apprenticeships. I just saw a stat yesterday from a client that said within 3 months, something like 26% have been promoted, but within the year, something like 92% have been promoted. So I know they track that, but I'm going to not make up an answer. That's the level of detail that I have, but the team has a greater level of detail.
Thanks.
Fabulous, thanks, Samuel. So we're almost out of time. I'm just interested, Elke, from the perspective that, when you talked about your 15 skills and the technical knowledge was so low down, do you feel, obviously it's really key in terms of our existing leadership development, but obviously for me, coming from a recruitment perspective, do you feel organisations are hiring the right sort of people when they are committed to sort of developing extraordinary leaders, or do you feel there's a shift change needed there, as well as once they've onboarded them and they're existing?
I love that question because it gives me the opportunity to tell you about the work we do in schools. I haven't mentioned it. If there's anyone out there working in an organisation that is passionate about changing education, then please come and talk to us. We're doing some amazing work in education. We're working with some incredible corporate partners to change education. And the reason I bring education in, apart from the fact that I wanted to, but it's relevant to answering your question. Right now, we have an education system that is not equipping people to thrive in the work environment, but we also have a work environment that is not equipping people to thrive. So if we look at the percentage of time that is spent in the curriculum around knowledge-based activity, it's off the chart. And then somehow they stick a bit of D&V or a bit of young entrepreneurs on the side. And apparently we're going to develop our confidence and our resilience because just by squabbling over, what the brand of soap it is that we're going to be offering to our parents to pay at an extortionate rate. So the reality is the education system needs totally rethinking. From a corporate perspective, we are receiving kids that have been often coached within an inch of their life, that are not used to getting behavioral feedback, human development. So in fact, we ran an event, and it's probably on our website. It's called COVID as a Catalyst, where Helen Cook, the Chief People Officer at NatWest, spoke. And she was talking about actually there needs to be an education business coalition. So the answer is, I think we have the best educated, technically educated population ever, right? I have 5 daughters, and I can tell you now, they know far more than I ever knew and will ever know. But my daughter's a slight exception because they've been surrounded by coaches all their lives. But actually the skills that they're coming into with work, no, I think there's the latest stat out there, which is saying 88% of CEOs don't believe the population is prepared for work. So we have even more work to do. The problem is we're not doing it. We're not doing it. So people come in on apprenticeships or graduate schemes and they do placements and they learn about the business and they do all that, but we're not giving them the human skills that are going to create the difference that we need to create if we're going to create more better leaders. That's where we need to start, which is why I sold my last business, which was working all over the world in senior leadership development, and decided we needed to start sooner with a younger population, because if we're going to create change, I believe that's where we're going to do it. Long-term proper change.
Yeah.
In both parts. Come and help us change the schools, please.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? As you make such a really powerful point there, it's very critical. So that's great. So that brings us to an end at 12 o'clock. Elke, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that's joined. We hope you found the session really informative. I know I did. Everyone will receive a copy of the recording, obviously all of Elke's details as well. And if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to contact myself and I can forward any questions on to Elke if you don't contact Elke directly yourselves. So thanks everyone, and thank you, Elke. Brilliant. Take care.
Thank you.